the wrong button. 1 second. Super Jack, Super Jack J. Collins. Welcome to the show, man. Good to see you. And I pressed the wrong scene there twice in OBS, so that was a bit of an anticlimax at the end. Welcome to the Rivals Game Week, free chatting about all the things from across the Premier League. And this wonderful man alongside me, Jack Collins from Ranks FC. Jack, good morning, mate. How you doing? You good?
Yes, I'm great, mate. Good morning. How you doing? You well? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Did you like the song?
I loved it. It was my song when I played at uni.
Was it?
So I'm delighted.
It was like a
I've heard it
throwback
for a long time. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those.
Did you like that?
Cool.
Like a through in the J as well, not just Jackie.
Yeah, I know. They used to go Jackie. Yeah, so I feel like you've gone one up here. You've really upgraded.
See,
so I appreciate it.
That's the research you get on this channel, you know. Like I don't know anything about the football games of the weekend, but I'll definitely give you a damn good song. That's pretty much all that matters. Anyway, if you are new to this series, basically, I saw something to try in this year on the channel where I talk a little bit more about the city's rivals, because obviously it's a city channel, but I want to talk more broadly around the Premier League every now and then, just because it's fun to talk about the bigger picture and so on. And of course, so far I've had Joe from Football Daily, I've had Leah's from SDS, and now Jack Course from Ranks. We've done loads of stuff together last season, particularly I think it was on Live Score quite a bit. Jack's a top bloke and a Fulham fan, which adds a nice little angle actually. I love also wearing a cracking Fiorentina shirt, which is also a nice angle for the channel always. Jack, we'll actually start there actually, because it makes an awful lot of sense, Arsenal, Fulham, that was a hell of a game at the weekend. From my perspective as a City fan, I'm already, which feels crazy, already looking at 2 points dropped. But you're obviously looking more at Fulham, having a great performance and so on. What was your feeling around that game? Firstly, do you feel like the points were fair in the end? Were you impressed with Arsenal? Not so, and were you impressed with Fulham? Who deserved it? Go on. What was your general reading on the game?
So I was on FTV the week before, and I was saying that it's a really weird one because after their game against Palace, the celebrations were very much like, "Wow, we've got the 3 points here." And look, there's absolutely nothing wrong with celebrating that. I'm not suggesting that's a bad thing, but it felt almost like the pressure was already on to win every game.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what that was going to feel like in an Arsenal context. That from at the start of last season, and we had a similar time frame last year. We played Arsenal, I think, our first away game of last season. And actually, the way it kind of looked after that was everyone was like, "This is nice. Arsenal are good." And I was saying to them, "You've got kind of a free run at this. You've got to go. You can have a kind of." A charge at something that no one's quite sure what it is yet. And I kind of backed Arsenal to have a good season then and now. But when you're kind of looking at this and you're going, right, now you've come second, you've spent a hell of a lot of money, not as much as Chelsea, but that's a big outlay for Arsenal considering the last couple of years. I think that their expectations are very, very different. And suddenly it's like any points dropped, away to Palace, home to Fulham. These aren't normally games, I think, where most teams will go, okay, home to Fulham, fine. But away to Palace, you go, we got to Selhurst Park, we got a point. It's not the end of the world. I think it feels like the end of the world a bit in Arsenal terms right now. And that's, I think, quite interesting and quite changed. It was a good game, I thought. Look, Joao Palhinha is the most effective footballer in the Premier League. And I think that Rodri is the best defensive midfielder in the world. And I don't think there's much question about that right now. But in terms of what a single player brings to a team, I think Joao Palhinha is worth about 8 places in the Premier League to Fulham.
Really?
And I am shocked that no one, even at that kind of 70 million price tag,
I saw a rumor about City
come and have a nibble.
Yeah, it was only very minor yesterday, but when all the Nunes stuff was going around, it's always a slight link about Paulina. But is he that good, man? Is that good for you? Obviously, I've seen bits of him and here and there, and I've seen him when we play Fulham, but has he been that incredible for you? Yeah.
He's a one-man wrecking ball. Without him, and there were 4 or 5 games where Fulham didn't have him last season because he picked up 15 yellow cards or whatever it was. So he spent a lot of time, suspended as well. But
cause damage,
the games. So. That's it. But the games where Palhinha wasn't there, it was so obvious. And the first 2 games of this season, Fulham didn't have Palhinha. And it was so obvious that there was just a gaping hole in the midfield. And I think that what he showed in that Arsenal game was he came back in, he basically shut down Ødegaard. It looked like there was like a £115 million defensive midfielder on the pitch, and it wasn't Declan Rice. Let's go with that. And that's no slight on Rice, who actually was pretty good. But it's one of those. So I think that you look at that game, and Fulham obviously started brilliantly. Arsenal a little bit sloppy. They grew into it. They at 2-1 up against 10 men. You probably shouldn't be conceding equalisers, but that's the way it goes sometimes. I thought Fulham were relatively good value for a point. if I'm honest. And I wasn't expecting very much going into that game. So for that to happen in that regard, I thought was nice. So yeah, look, I'm not worried about Arsenal. I think they're going to be fine. I think they are going to be the second best side in the league this year. I think they will push again. But at the moment, it just feels like everything's a little bit overcomplicated. And I do wonder if there is an element of trying to just, go one better immediately, when actually the sensible thing might have been to go out there, get 9 points on the board before the international break, and just be like, okay, we're in the conversation, before you start to tinker with it quite as much as Arteta has.
I think I agree with that, because that was going to be my next question anyway. Because obviously, Jack, obviously a Fulham fan. I'm actually doing an opposition preview with Jack. We're going to record it after this, and I'll put it out in a couple of days, so we're closer to the game of the weekend. So I'm not going to focus on Fulham too much, if that's all right, Jack, for now. But I do want to talk about Arsenal a little bit there, because that was going to be my next question. Has he sort of tinkered a little bit much? Because I understand when you got the shiny new toys, you want to bring him in, and you spent a lot of money, and you sort of have to justify them to an extent. It's weirdly un-Guardiola-esque for Arteta to just sort of throw him in, especially in the heart of midfield. Kai Havertz is playing a lot, and Declan Rice is playing a lot, rightfully so to an extent, given the price they pay for him. But is it too much, Because, as you said, there was a sort of tried and tested formula last season that worked, and it doesn't matter how good you are, Declan Rice has got an awful lot to learn in this system. And Kai Havertz, is coming off the back of a couple of years of sort of, an underwhelming time at Chelsea where, maybe his confidence isn't quite there. Is it a bit too much too soon? Is he changing things? I mean, I saw Arsenal fans already going, "Can we not just play Zinchenko at left back, Ben White at right back, and then play Saliba and Gabriel?" And instead of playing, you've got Thomas Partey who's currently right back. You've got, Gabriel was dropped with Ben White sort of playing in defence, and Kivor was at left back. Then of course the midfield feels totally different to last season, because you've got Havertz and Declan Rice in there. Trossard sort of playing as a false 9, I think he was at the weekend. Is it a little bit too much too soon? Should he have just gone a little bit more straightforward?
I think they've been unlucky with injuries, which is probably important to note before we kind of look at it. And he's trying to find different solutions to things. And actually, what I found really interesting about the back line was that obviously, with all the injuries that happened, and Jurriën Timber in there, kind of to begin with, and he was brilliant, I thought, in the Community Shield. And suddenly he's got a season-ending injury. You're going, okay, what happens now? Zinchenko was coming back from injury, and also then sort of decided to play in that charity game instead of playing in the Community Shield, which obviously you can understand, but I can imagine that Arteta might have been looking at going, okay, well, maybe you're not going to start the season. Just a couple of things sort of in the background, and I can understand that with a kind of more natural progressive left back rather than Zinchenko inverting, they've gone for a right back who wants to tuck in instead. So you can kind of read why they're doing it and look at it. But equally, I think that when you're then making changes in midfield, I think Rice coming in is completely natural, and that's fine. Havertz steps in for Granit Xhaka, which is, they had an enforced change there, but equally, as you say, this is a new position, or not a new position, it's an old position for him, but a new position considering what he's played for Chelsea for the last few years. I actually think that this is the position that suits him best. Once he gets to grips with this system, this is that kind of bursting into the box late, making those late runs. Mm-hmm. We saw a bit of that at Leverkusen. He played all over the shop for Leverkusen, but generally, like him arriving late, ghosting in, that kind of Thomas Muller-esque quality that he had, I think that he will be better served from midfield. But I just think there's a lot of moving parts. And then you add that to the Gabby Jesus injury, and suddenly it's like, okay, there's 6 players changed from last season. The Gabriel stuff with him potentially being head turned by Saudi Arabia. I can understand all of the decisions, but equally, even with that in context, I think it maybe is just a little bit much. And that's why Arsenal haven't quite hit the ground running that they haven't been. So I'm not criticising Arteta for it, because I don't think he's had all that much choice, just considering the circumstances. But I think that's why we haven't seen Arsenal at their fluid best yet.
Yeah, I think that's all pretty fair. And it's one of those things where it could easily have turned into 9 points very easily. And
exactly. We wouldn't be criticising. Exactly. Fans might still have the question marks over their head, but they wouldn't be like, "What's going on here?"
Yeah, if the one-on-one wrecking ball doesn't score in the 87th minute, all of a sudden, they're still joint top of the table and so on. And I would argue joint top doesn't exist. that's one of my biggest bugbears in football. Joint top doesn't exist. Top exists, and that's it. Would it have been top? Let's have a look. What's the goal difference? I can't remember. It's irrelevant anyway.
I don't think so, considering they've been pretty tight wins.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, it would have been City still. Well, what do you think the ceiling? Do you think Arsenal personally? I know it's a very snap judgment. Do you still feel that they have within them this season, a challenge, because obviously the narrative around them, whether it's fair or not, is it's going to be harder. The pressure's there. They've got the Champions League, they've got a lot. The City have started well. We've started really well, obviously you could change that on the weekend.
Control.
Yeah, do you feel like City, can Arsenal, can they keep up with City? I know it's a very simple question, but
I think they have the best chance of doing so.
Yeah.
And I think that the squad that they have put together this summer, whilst it might not be quite clicking yet and quite fluid yet, I think that there is enough strength and depth in this side to come second. And I haven't been wildly impressed with too many people, to be honest, at this point of the season. And obviously that can change, and it takes a while for teams to get going. And as a City fan, that often it has taken time to get going in seasons, and actually it's that back end run which can really propel you all the way to the top. I think Arsenal have the best chance of challenging where we sit right now on Wednesday morning. There is still 2 days of this transfer window left. I think that where we are currently is that Arsenal have the best squad in terms of challenging City, and I think they have the depth to deal with that Champions League run, but I don't think it's going to be enough.
I hope you're right. I absolutely hope you're right. I'm trying to remove, obviously, my inherent bias from the picture, but I feel like you're right. It feels a bit chaotic too early, and City have started so far anyway. Could change, touch wood from my perspective. It doesn't at the weekend. You'd be buzzing if it did. But it's one of those things where it could be that City have just started a little bit stronger, and it feels a little bit more. We're obviously helps that Kovacic and Guardiola fitted like a glove, like that. They've just come in and been absolutely just ridiculous. They've been so good straight away that when you look at the structure of this team, it just seems right. It seems sometimes things just feel easy. They feel natural, and that's where City are right now. And everywhere you look around, which leads me on to the next game, feels a lot more chaotic. The title of this video actually it should have been about Arsenal. Looking back, I might even change it in hindsight. But the title of the video is about Liverpool because the big game of the weekend. Though I've noticed a typo in it actually. I spelled challenge wrong. What an absolute idiot! That's a tired dad for you there. Of course, the narrative around the weekend was that big game. That massive game, Newcastle, Liverpool, chaos embodied in 100 minutes of football. Absolutely manic. It's one of those games where, obviously if you're a Liverpool fan, you're buzzing to win it. Yeah. But does it paper over some cracks in what has been a quite chaotic start to the season for Liverpool as well? Some brilliant individual performances, and look, there's still no signs of Salah slowing down by the looks of it. A bit of magic for that second assist in particular is just beautiful. And obviously the new man started, Wataru Endo, Japanese midfielder, playing in number 6. So they've got, you look at that team on paper, it's pure vibes, it's just goals, energy, it's just fun. But is it, what did you make of their performance? I know it's weird because of the red card sort of just changed the dynamic of the game early on, half an hour in. Also, Newcastle as well, there's two ways of looking at it. They had such an impressive start to the season, of course, and then the City, anyone can lose to City, but this will sting for Newcastle, won't it, as well? I know there's a double-ended two questions there, but what was your general take from this game? Did anyone coming out of this smelling of roses?
Well, Darwin did.
Darwin did, yeah, he definitely did.
I don't think Liverpool will be delighted, as you say, with the 3 points, but I do wonder if this is sustainable. Also, I think it's really intriguing that Liverpool have been better with 10 men in the last 2 games than they have been with 11. Yeah. And part of it is the fact that just when they seem to have 10 men, Trent just seems to play right back. And instead of just going wandering around the pitch. And look, I love Trent, and I feel like there's so much slander and so much kind of abrasiveness maybe around his character and around what he does on a football pitch. So it's very easy to forget that I think he's one of the best creators in this league. Yeah. And yes, obviously he has defensive vulnerabilities. That's fine. But equally, you have to set up to allow him to have those, because if you have a player of that creative, ability, you have to get them in the right positions to be able to do so. Now, I don't think that's inverting him into centre midfield. I think that he is best when he's allowed to roam down that flank and basically do what he wants. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they do that. I still think Liverpool could deal with someone like a Benjamin Pavard, who's obviously going to Inter Milan, would have been a brilliant signing for Liverpool, because it's that kind of right centre-back hybrid who would have been able to just cover over and understand the intricacies of playing that position. And so I think that there is something in that. But yeah, I thought Endo did okay on his first start. equally, I think you look at this kind of game and think Newcastle will be sick as dogs, so that they were 1-0 up against 10 men with 10 minutes to go
Missing
and have
chances as
somehow
well.
not won the game. Missed big chances, were in complete control, and Liverpool went full chaos mode. And I think that in full chaos mode, Liverpool can damage anybody.
Yeah.
And I also think that there is going to be a thing this year where Liverpool tend to do better against the big teams than they might do against smaller sides.
The
And
adrenaline,
there's
isn't it?
a little bit, but also I think that just the way that they're set up, and especially the idea of bringing someone like Darwin off the bench, who I feel like is one of the most potent weapons you can have in transition, coming off a bench late on in a game, is like how many teams are going to open up and let Liverpool have the kind of space that Newcastle did on the counter? And I think the answer is not very many. And at which point you have to look at Darwin. And we were talking about this on Ranks. The idea that if you're talking about, is Darwin going to start now because he scored 2 goals the weekend? I'm like, well, it kind of depends, because if he hasn't got space to run into, then Darwin is actually a very different player to, you know, if he's sitting on the edge of the box trying to take intricate touches and flick things around, he can do that, but he's definitely not as potent a threat when he's not running in behind. And so if you're playing a team who are sitting deep in a low block at Anfield, Darwin is not going to have the same effect that he might do in a game like this. And so it's interesting to consider. I still think Liverpool are light on depth. And I don't think I'm breaking any sort of wild news to anybody by saying this, but it just feels like this squad is 1 or 2 key injuries away from having a kind of minor collapse again. I really like Soberstite. I really like McAllister. I think it's a really good midfield overhaul. I think they could do with another body in there, maybe someone who could cover 6 and 8. But generally, you're kind of looking at this and thinking, this is a good side. I'm just wondering if they're going to be too chaotic to sustain a challenge over the course of a season. That would be my early takeaways. But if they sign Kefren Turam and 2 others in the next 2 days, then maybe that changes. But right now, I just feel like they're too chaotic. Newcastle, I think, are going to come good. And I think that this midfield has such beautiful balance about it. You know, I think that you look at the ability of Bruno Guimaraes to play from deep. You look at Joel Linton's ability to carry on the ball. You look at Tonali's energy rate. You look at the fact that he's able to make those late darts into the box. I love the fact that everyone looked at Tonali and went, right, yeah, Pirlo regen. He's nothing like Andrea Pirlo, apart from he's got really good dead ball delivery. That is the only similarity.
Just wonderful hair.
Yeah, and wonderful hair. Yeah, that's fair. Completely fair enough. But he's a Gattuso player, not a Pirlo player. He runs around, he smashes into things.
That's so St. James as well, isn't it? That's like they love that. They love that, you know. Like
oh yeah, he's going to be beloved there. Absolutely beloved.
Yeah, I mean, I was chatting to Alex Hurst before the game. He was a Newcastle fan, and he was just saying like, oh, they love him already because like he loved that. I mean, he's just. I think they didn't realize how energetic he was. I think they thought he would be this elegant, graceful, you know, gliding around the pitch, but he's just a bulldog, you know. Like, and that just suits Newcastle. You know, I think certain clubs need certain kind of players, and I think Gary Neville gets a lot of stick for this, but he talks about how he wants United to play in a certain kind of way. And look, I don't really think any club should ever play a certain way, but I think there's always a grain of truth that certain crowds react to certain things. And you know, he talks about United flying wingers, blah blah blah, a bit more direct and aggressive football. And I think Newcastle's another one. If you have a physical midfield and the crunching in, and Liverpool once again, they're an emotional, aggressive team. Like certain clubs, just certain super kind of players. And Tonali, yeah, I mean that midfield, it's really good, it's really good, it's really good. And they should have won that game in the end comfortably. They'll be kicking themselves that they didn't. But I think there's undeniable quality there. When you look around the Premier League, there is a gap for them once again to maintain that position that they're in. And let's see how the Champions League treats them. I'm looking at the table right now. West Ham up there. What have you made of West Ham start, by the way? Look at that midfield rebuild. That's smart, isn't it? You know, Kudus, Ward-Prowse, Alvarez. That's a really smart bunch of signings, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think they've done really well in the market, and it looks like they haven't finished yet as well. I think it's going to be interesting. I was worried about West Ham before the season began.
Same.
And obviously they've now signed some players, which changed things. It looks like they're bringing in Yuri Alberto out of Corinthians as well to finally give someone a break to play with Mikel Antonio.
Good goal.
That man feels like he's brilliant. He's absolutely sensational. But it's a similar thing, I think, with West Ham as I'm kind of talking about Liverpool, in that they're so direct and they're so good in transition transition. You look at Bowen and Antonio there. You look at Ward-Prowse being a dead ball specialist, and you look at the fact that Souček and Alvarez are not going to let very many through them. Let's put it that way. They're going to be a bit of a shield wall there. So when that's all considered, I actually think that West Ham might do better again against teams who really go at them.
Yeah.
I wonder how effective they are going to be against teams who go, no, you're all right, actually, thanks very much. And look, I think that you look at the first game against Bournemouth, and yes, obviously you have to deal with the fact that signings hadn't come through yet, but they kind of struggled in that game, I thought. And, it felt like Bournemouth were in the ascendancy. West Ham were maybe lucky to get a point out of it. It feels like a weird thing to say considering Bournemouth scored late to equalise, but actually I thought that Bournemouth were the team in the ascendancy throughout the game. But then you look at the Chelsea game where they kind of hung in through that end of that first half where it was all Chelsea and then just blitzed them on the break. Yeah. And it felt similar against Brighton, right? It just felt that as much as Brighton had 80% of the ball and created enough around the box, every time West Ham got the ball in transition, they were going to score. And I think when you kind of look at like that and you look in that kind of dangerous mood, it's going to be interesting to see West Ham might have a say on the title race more than being in the European conversation, because I think they'll play well against the big teams and maybe struggle a little bit more against the teams around them.
No, I think that's pretty much spot on. I want to move to Spurs, if that's all right, because I don't think I've even spoken to him. I was going to speak. I was going to get to speak to Flav. I think next week, hopefully, about Spurs as well. But I want to chat to you about them. Are you all aboard the Big Ange hype train? Because obviously, he's immensely impressive. Like I know City were the City Football Group, which is such a horrific thing to say, but it's just true. I know they're a big fan of him in general because obviously he managed over in Japan. For them, he's got he's got such an impressive reputation, and it's hard not to like him. He's immensely likable. Of course, very Spursy result last night for them getting knocked out the Carabao Cup, but still their start to the league, 2-0 at the weekend. James Maddison continues to be an absolute diamond, and in this market, 40 million for Maddison just looks ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I think it's fair to say if someone's trying to buy James Maddison now, if Leicester in the league, that's double. It's double immediately. Someone's asking for 80 million, and they've got him, of course. The question marks remain over the long-term replacement of, Harry Kane. I'm not sure Richarlison's currently there. Could be, because obviously he's got the ability, but it's a drop down. Basuma, revival, been absolutely wonderful. Yes, so what have you made so far of the Spurs start to the season? It looks, all things look rosy for them, don't they, currently?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really impressed with them. I mean, I went last night to watch them at the Cottage, and they were not very good. Not very good at all. Now, Ange made 9 changes, so I mean, you can take everything that happened last night, I think, with a pinch of salt. But I was surprised that there was a real lack of energy around it. And look, there was a lot of Spurs fans complaining that the changes and that made it feel like a lack of ambition. One, they were like, we've got 2 chances to win a trophy. One of them's done before September the 1st, only Spurs. And I was like, well, not only Spurs, loads of teams go out in the Carabao Cup, but I know what you mean. And I think that what we've seen in the league so far has been really impressive. I expect to bounce back from them at the weekend. But look, I watched a lot of Ange back when he was at Melbourne, and then I watched a lot of him when he was in Scotland with Celtic. I didn't watch that much of him at the Yokohama F Marinos. I'll be perfectly honest with you.
That's fine. I didn't either. So.
But I've loved him, and I loved him at Celtic Park. I thought that he was the exact kind of manager that Celtic needed. And we were talking, we're talking about a man who impressed fans so much over the course of his 2 years there that I've got Celtic fans on ranks coming to me and saying, I'm bored watching Celtic. I'm now looking forward to watching Ange's Tottenham Hotspur more than my own club. There's a bit of a cult going on here, and I completely understand why, because he goes for it. And also, he's a wonderful manager of the media. Yeah. And I think there are elements of Fergie in what he does with the media. There's a little bit of, I defend my own at all costs. But on top of that, he's happy to talk and make a joke with the occasional journalist.
He's sarcastic. I like that, actually. He's not all sunshine and roses. I like that. I like he's a little bit more like he's quite dry, he never feels like in a bullying sense. He'll take the piss, but it's always like you're in on the joke with him. And he'll just. I really like it. It's very refreshing to see someone who just talks to you like you would a friend in the pub. Wind you up, be like, And the use of the word mate is just it'll always go down well. Every sentence anyway. Yeah, mate.
It's just lots of fun. He seems like a really good guy. And look, when you actually read Ange's story and all of this, it's really interesting that he was like, okay, I didn't play football because I was like, okay, winning is everything. He's like, yes, we like to win, but a lot of the time at Celtic, he spent talking about the fact that these fans are paid to come and see them. They need to be entertained. It's not about just grinding results over the line. It's about making sure that people have a good time. And that comes down from his dad, who was his first coach and who believed that football was about entertainment and making sure that people were enjoying themselves. And to be honest, it's exactly what Spurs need, isn't it? Imagine the dreariness. And we were talking about different things and last season. The fact that Liverpool had a first half of the season collapse. Chelsea finished in the worst position in, 20 years. And Tottenham still managed to be the funniest club in the Premier League. It's like, you're thinking, how can anybody turn this club around? But I do feel that Ange is the kind of man who can get fans on board. And I was talking to Neil Atkinson on the Anfield Wrap the other day, and we were discussing what Spurs' targets should be for the season. And we were saying, if I was the Spurs manager, we'd go out and say, go and score 100 goals in all competitions. Because if you do so, you'll almost certainly lock down a European place, because at least 70 of those have to come in the Premier League. And then on top of that, you're making fans entertained. There's fun. It's good to be on the terraces again. There is a sense of enjoyment about it. And then you can build from there.
It's attractive for the players as well. It's attractive. Like, everyone wants to be seen to play for that kind of club. And the stadium sells itself. Tottenham are still a very big club. We can't deny that. Even if they have some kind of jokey finishes every now and then, they're still Tottenham. They're a hugely attractive club to play for. And if you're playing great football with a manager that becomes immensely likeable, and obviously a year from now, his profile would have rocketed. Let's be honest, because he's going to be in front of the Premier League media every single week. That's a wonderful assessment. I absolutely agree. Go and score goals. Just be entertaining, be electric. And I think that will solve a lot of their problems. I know it sounds really obvious because goals solve problems in football, but for them in particular, for Spurs, and I know the Spurs fans are absolutely gasping for it as well, because the Conte reign for them was just toxic and negative and just obviously an elite manager, but so ill-fitting, to everything that Spurs were trying to do there. And it feels weird to sort of root for Spurs because I don't want to, but at the same time, I'm sort of rooting for him because he's such a wonderful. And you want to see
I'm
good
exactly
people.
the same. I can't speak of it enough. I don't want Spurs to do well because I'm a Fulham fan. They are a London rival, but equally, I am desperate for Ange Postecoglou to keep shaking off the negativity that seems to surround him whenever he takes a job. There was so much of it at Celtic. There was pouring downs of Rangers fans being like, this random Australian will be gone by Christmas. You're like, treble, see you later. It's, it feels like one of those
treble,
real
see you later.
Great. What a way to walk. But you kind of look at it as Spurs and you're going, there's so much of it. And I was really hot on this appointment. I was sad that he left Celtic, but I was hot on the appointment going, he deserves his shot in the Premier League. And we're talking to Dean, on Ranks, and he was like, I just worry that the Spurs fans, after a month, if things aren't going well, we'll look at it and be like, who's this dude? And they'll kick off. But what we've seen so far is excellent, and the Spurs fans seem to love him, and that's good. That's a good thing.
They didn't know what was coming, did they, mate? What a wonderful man. And fair play to him. This has been an inspired appointment, to fair. And to be honest, I don't even think he was their number one. I think he just came into that, the old classic you talk about them interviewing managers, which you presumably never really actually do. They think like they just want the one they want. But I reckon they did it. Well, they obviously do it, but I reckon they spoke to him. He's like, oh my God, he's really good. Immensely likeable. He
speaks well.
Yeah, he speaks well, and he's quite imposing as well, and he's just the kind of guy who looks in your eyes and you're like, I trust you. I'm coming with you, Ange. And there's a lot to be said for that, because that's just obviously natural charisma. And I read a fact about him how he literally translated for Ferenc Puskas as well, didn't he, or something like that? Where that's crazy. Everyone's like, that question the other day is like, I'm just copying Pep, mate. But the truth is, he was playing that system as a young player while translate for Puskas as a footballer. Stupid heritage. Stupid. That is a story up there, with the greats. And that people don't realise that about him. And I love that. I love that background. It's just as exciting as it comes. Before we wrap up this video, I just want to talk a little bit about Chelsea, which will also lead me on to the actual, the newly promoted teams a tiny bit. The Raheem Sterling redemption. They saw these quotes come out as well the other day about him talking about how he said, he wanted to be a little bit closer to goal and, not closer to goal, sorry, facing the goal and not moving around so much, because he felt like his back was to goal an awful lot. And he was moving positions, so he wasn't getting his partnerships. Look, I love Raheem Sterling. I was gutted when he went, because I don't think he should have ever left. I think he would have absolutely thrived playing alongside Erling Haaland on the right. I think he would have been perfect. But that was Sterling back to his best, and encouraging signs for Chelsea. You know, obviously they were excellent, but you know, the new guy getting a goal, it's a good performance. What have you made of this new Chelsea and this not new but old Sterling?
All right, I'm all here for the Raz redemption story. Yeah. You know, he comes from up the road from me, and so I've always had a soft spot for
Best
him.
mates.
But exactly the opposite ends of the 297 bus. Me and Raheem. But it's an interesting one. Like, obviously, I thought they were good against Luton, but equally it was Luton. I actually weirdly think they were pretty good against West Ham. And actually, on a different day, they come at that with 3 points. And they look at this season, you're talking about 7 points after 3 games. And suddenly it's like, oh, okay, are Chelsea back in the conversation? Instead, they're on 4 points. And people are going, oh, I'm not sure about this new Chelsea. I'm still not convinced by the 3 at the back. No. And I find it very weird that Pochettino played 4 at the back through the entirety of pre-season and then switched for the opening game and hasn't looked back. Obviously, part of that is to do with Christian Nkunku's injury. Mm-hmm. But I did think that once they did sign a midfield shield, and now they have Caicedo and Enzo in there together, that they might just turn back to a 4 when it felt a little bit more comfortable. They still might, I suppose, but they're looking for that link player. Nicholas Jackson I've been impressed with, but equally I'm still not convinced he's a number 9 yet, or a Premier League number 9. I think he might be very, very useful cutting in from that left-hand side with that ability to carry, and it just takes away a little bit from the finishing ability. So I wonder if they still go back in for one more striker in this market. But yeah, it's been the Raheem show, hasn't it? And I think that's obviously nice to see. You know, he had a really tough year last year, and suddenly it was a question mark of what's happening. Is this the end? Is Raheem on the downslope? And then suddenly he explodes into life this season. It's got to be good for England, right? As well, the fact that there's a Euros at the end of the year, you want someone like Raheem Sterling on fizzling form, and that's what we've seen so far this season. I'm not convinced. It sounds really weird, but I still kind of feel like Chelsea need to get rid of about 8 and get 2 more through the door. And it seems mad considering what they've done in this transfer market so far. But I still think they lack a natural number 9. And I think that even with Nkunku back, they don't have that. And I wonder if just you want someone sensible and maybe a little bit older. And I know the project has been by young players and, you know, who have sell-on value and long contracts, etc., etc. But I wonder if you just bring in someone like a Mehdi Taremi from Porto and you just go, here's a number 9 that we know about. Nick Jackson, you learn from this guy.
Yeah.
And we just have him for 2 years and he just sort of fades in and out of the team and gives you something. And I look back to when United signed Cavani, right? And you suddenly go, oh, wow, they put a striker in who could score goals and they became better like that.
Well, he's a good fit as well from what you're saying. I think Taremi would be a really good fit for them. You know, a proven goal scorer, a lot of experience. I don't know. I presume he's old. I don't know how old he is. I guess he's 30 plus anyway. But he's the kind of guy who would come in. You'd be able to afford him. I reckon you'd get him for a decent price. And it's one of those things where he would just add a little bit of a focal point and a bit of experience. And like, I know it sounds really basic, but sometimes football is as simple as that, isn't it? You know, like square blocks and square holes, and Sterling would thrive playing off him as well. You know, I think that's a good shout. Like, would he? Yeah, they're not going to do it, obviously, but that would be a sensible shout. You know, and I do think they are lacking a little bit. It's really weird because I mean, the more money they spend, but I'm looking at the bench from the other day, I'm like, there's still a lot of holes there. You know, and like it's obviously the way they're going for it, but. Yeah, we'll see how they get on. They did, of course, play Luton. You know, Luton, they've not had the best start. They've lost both of the games so far. Burnley, the same. Of course, Burnley and Luton have only played 2 games each because I think their game was cancelled. Yeah, Sheffield United lost all 3. Not been the best start for the newly promoted. What have you made of those 3 so far? You know, some rude awakenings for Burnley in particular because obviously, you know, all the hype around them.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been in this exact position with Fulham when we came up under Slavica Jokanovic, and it was that swashbuckling football. Now, we got Jokanovic late in the season, we got going late, so we ended up going up through the playoffs rather than storming to the title as champions. But I think that the parallels are there, and the parallels are there with Norwich City as well. Yeah. You know, who wandered through the Championship at times under Daniel Farke and looked brilliant, and then got to the Premier League and couldn't adapt. And I think Burnley have a better chance of adapting. I quite like some of the signings they've made. They've spent money in a way that Norwich didn't. But equally, it is hard to make that adaptation from being a team who completely dominate every game to a team that are usually under the cosh. And a lot of teams struggle with it. So I think they'll be okay. no, I don't know if that's going to be enough for survival, but I think they will do better than the other two promoted sides.
Yeah.
But right now, I think that they are in that period of rude awakening, as you say, and it feels like very much like it's like, okay, Burnley, they had spells, I thought, in that game against City where they looked really, really good.
Yeah.
And I think they will continue to have spells in games, but they just need to learn how to, to ride out the waves a little bit more. And it's something they probably didn't experience very much last season. It's nothing, as we say, we've only played 2 games, and I don't think there's anything to be particularly stressed about losing to a Man City side who won the treble and a Villa side who got to Europe.
Yeah.
Under Unai Emery. I think we're going to find out a little bit more. They've got Tottenham next as well. It's a horrible start for them. But I think we find out a little bit more about them when they have Nottingham Forest, when they have Brentford, when they have Bournemouth, when they have Fulham, Crystal Palace. These are the games that I'm interested in seeing what they're capable of. So I'm not overly worried, but I agree with you that it's been a bit of a rude awakening. I'm worried for Luton Town.
Yes.
Now, obviously, we haven't seen the Kenilworth Road factor yet. They opened the stand last night. And they opened the ground last night as a test run in the EFL Cup, where they won 3-2 against Gillingham in a game that was a little bit more tetchy than I think they might have liked, considering that it was a relatively strong Luton side. There was a couple of changes, but not too many. They've been poor, I think, generally. Now, again, they've come up against Brighton, who were excellent, and they've come up against Chelsea side, who really needed a result, and it was at the Bridge on a Friday night, etc. We haven't seen what Kenilworth Road can do, and obviously it's a tiny stadium. The fans are right on top of you. It's going to have an atmosphere that a lot of Premier League players aren't used to, and that's going to be very interesting, I think, just in terms of how it kind of plays out. Mm-hmm. But whether that's enough to get this team over the line, Luton have done something which might be very sensible. They've signed a load of players who I think will get them promoted again in the Championship. I agree. And that's not a criticism, because that actually might be financially the most sustainable thing for them to do right now. But I do worry that that's going to be a problem for them going forward. And then you look at Sheffield United and you're thinking about it and going, well, hang on, there's no McAtee and there's no Tommy Doyle.
Yeah. So they might get one of them, actually. They might get one back in.
Might get one of them.
But they've done the similar. They have signed Hamer, who obviously will get them promoted. You'll get them very close, at least. You know that, because obviously he got very close.
I think Hamer's good enough. I think Hamer's good enough to play in the Premier League. I really do. I think he's a very, very good footballer. And his goal, obviously, the other week was excellent. The squad is a little bit light, especially up top, and obviously they've lost a lot of big players, right? So obviously Iliman Ndiaye decided that he was off to Marseille. That's frustrating. Sander Berge moving to Burnley must have hurt. You'd imagine, that's one that you're going, I could really have done without that. But yeah, I mean, look, they're still sort of scrapping around. I think Tom Davies is quite a good signing. I think Cameron Archer's a very good signing. But I just think that they're a couple short of currently being Premier League quality. But they need someone to turn up. So obviously they bought Vinicius Souza from Belgium. They bought Anis Slimane from Denmark. Yeah. These are the moves that kind of, if Brighton or Brentford were making them, we'd be like, oh, that could be interesting. So, I don't want to write them off early doors, because I think that Slimane in particular is a really interesting player. But it's one of those where they need a few of these to really work pretty quickly for things to turn around for them. And it does feel like they've been a bit hamstrung in the market, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, we'll leave this episode of The Rivals there. Thank you so much for all your insight, as always. Guys, don't forget you can check out Jack and his gang over at Ranks FC with Sam and Dean. It's wonderful stuff. Go and check it out if you haven't already. There's a link in the description below, as standard. Jack, thank you very much for coming on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. I've absolutely loved it.
And guys, thank you for everyone who's been watching live. If you are finding this kind of content, as always, do please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. This face alongside him will be back in a couple of days for the opposition preview, which, spoiler, we're recording right after this, but schedule it and all that kind of stuff. I might change the topic to pretend that we've recorded something. No, I won't. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching this video. Like, subscribe. Of course, there's loads of content. Yes, you can go watch the podcast where we chat about Rodri, because you have to chat about Rodri. And of course, there's a little bit more about Nunes. Yes, you can watch those videos if you want to. For now, though, have a wonderful morning, a wonderful day. Bye bye. See you later, guys.